Hello, Vaughn. Well, there's usually no shortage of drama in BC politics, but this week, I think it has to take the cake with a budget and tariffs. And well, why don't you run us through what happened, starting with the budget
Well,
and tariffs?
yeah, the roller coaster ride bit is over exaggerated sometimes in our business, but I think this week qualifies for both the government and the opposition. So start with the government. We get a budget on Tuesday, an unusual beginning in the lockup. Normally, the budget lockup, where we're briefed on the contents of the budget before it's released to the public, that's the finance ministry's territory. The finance minister's in there, or staff's in there. Premier starts it off with a statement about what's coming this week on the tariff war. And yeah, his motivation is obvious. He would sooner we were writing about the tariff war than about the sad state of provincial finances. Happily, we're able to keep two ideas in our head at the same time. And I think there was a fair amount of coverage on both things this week. Series of news conferences with the Premier regarding the response to the ever changing Donald Trump tariffs, which I've lost track of how many times they changed this week. And we also had a pretty good look at the budget. And, well, the biggest story out of the budget, everybody saw it: debt, deficits. Every debt number in British Columbia is going in the wrong direction. The operating deficit every year is growing. Self-supporting debt that the Crown corporations have, that's growing. The debt that's picked up by central government, that's growing. Interest payments are growing. The debt as a share of the economy, of revenue, they're all headed in the wrong direction. So there's nothing to boast about there. And most of us looked at it and went, this trend started long before Donald Trump got elected president of the United States and long before the tariffs were announced.
So, in terms of what the NDP promised, because we aren't that far removed from a provincial election, and what we saw in the budget, uh, yeah.
Yeah. Again, in the lockup, there's a stack of documents, and all the reporters start reading through, and most of us had a copy of the NDP platform as well, because the election was, just in October. Well, we knew the grocery rebate wasn't going to be there. So we knew that one wasn't going to be there. You start looking at other stuff, and you're seeing headlines large and small. The election platform promised $500 million to expand childcare. Childcare funding is flatlined. Very ambitious housing programs. They're not line by line in the budget, although the housing minister says, oh, no, we're going to do all that stuff. One of the big ones, because it got so much attention, is involuntary treatment of the severely mentally ill and of severe drug addicts. So those people disproportionately are on the street, and disproportionately they account for random attacks of violence as well. So the Premier in the past promised that told us before the election, the solution is basically treatment centers. People will be involuntarily detained and treated. So, David Eby says it very quickly. We're not talking about, the kind of horror stories you saw generations ago of people strapped in straitjackets and injected with drugs. You're talking about modern day treatment centers. Well, not in the budget. Everybody looked. Nobody found, here is the program, even though David Eby said it was going to happen. So they got asked about that. He got asked about that. He said, okay, the money's there in the budget. It's hidden, buried in the increase in funding for the healthcare ministry. So there is more money there for health. And he said, and this is the checkable part. He said the first treatment place, voluntary care or voluntary treatment place will be opening in an expanded version of the pretrial center in Surrey and that will be open by the end of March. And the second facility will be open in Maple Ridge, and that's a new place, and that will be this spring. And the government is scouting around the province for similar treatment places around BC.
Vaughn, you mentioned it was also a roller coaster week for John Rustad and the BC Conservative opposition. What's going on there?
So last weekend, they had a convention in Nanaimo. Covered it. Alec Lazenby of the paper covered it as well. And that was basically a very successful convention for John Rustad. He got through 19 policies were approved. He got through a new constitution that was approved by better than 2/3. His hand-picked slate for the party directors, that was elected, his president reelected, and he got a well-received speech to the delegates, almost 800 delegates there. Rustad made the point there were more delegates there than there were members of the party when he started 2 years ago. And he got 5 standing ovations. So as a measurement, that was great. However, the week ended in a somewhat different dynamic. During the week, one of the Conservative MLAs who's gotten involved in this issue of residential schools and what happened at the residential school in Kamloops, Dallas Brody, she's the only Conservative elected in Vancouver last election. She comes out, posts a podcast where she has another go at basically beating up on her critics within the party who say she's got the wrong emphasis. Her point is that no child graves, the graves of no children have been dug up at the Kamloops residential school, to which most people would say yet. John Rustad says the emphasis should be, he said this several times, 4,000 Indigenous children were taken away from their families and they never came home. They died in residential schools and their remains weren't returned. And every residential school has a cemetery. And Rustad said that's the emphasis that's appropriate. Well, Brody doesn't accept it. In this podcast, she launches an attack on Aaliyah Warbus, who is the new MLA for Chilliwack, and she's also the House Leader of the Liberals, and she's Indigenous. And Brody says, the way she talks, it's out there on the podcast, people can see this, but basically she insinuates that Warbus is in league with the NDP and might be a better member of that party. So Rustad, Harold, has taken the view that you can have disagreements among the Conservatives, and he's even going to allow free votes. But the issue here is, can you have one of your MLAs attacking your House Leader, who's a central figure in your management of the House? And it really is, for party unity, it's very destructive. And here we are on Friday. As of the moment you and I are talking, there's no sign the Conservatives have sorted this out. There's some thought that they may kick Brody out of the caucus, sending her to sit as independents. There's been some suggestion that other Conservative MLAs are in sympathy with Brody and not with the party on this one. So it's a heck of a mess for Rustad. It's a test of his leadership. The only thing I would say is he had such a great weekend last weekend and such a vote of confidence from his own party that if he's going to deal with this is probably the best time for him to deal with it, whatever he does, and make his decision stick.
You mentioned others may be sympathetic to Brody. Do you care to venture a guess in terms of numbers based on what you're seeing there? Are we talking dozens or a small handful?
The group of dissidents, near as we can determine, is 4 or 5. The more strongly supportive of Rustad members, most of the caucus. So there's 44 Conservatives, including Rustad. That giving you an idea of how angry some Conservatives are at these outbursts and divisions on this issue. At least one conservative has taken to referring to the dissidents as the Donald Trump caucus of the party. So the New Democrats are looking at this across the floor. You know, they've got a fiscal crisis. They got a nightmare they didn't ask for in dealing with Donald Trump. They've got all kinds of issues, as we always do, with public safety and waiting lists for health care and all the issues, housing prices and all that. They cannot believe their good fortune that this opposition that came that close to winning the election and just racked up a party convention where they were fairly united. Some of them are at each other's throats over this and giving enormous aid and comfort to the government.
So if they did boot Brody, if he did boot Brody and 3 or 4 followed him out the door, you'd still be left with a caucus of 39 or 40. But then what would happen? Would there be concern in his quarter about what that rump group might do? Would they become a new party?
We could be back to having 4 parties in the legislature. Well, Rustad was a lone wolf when he was kicked out of the BC Liberals, right? But as soon as Bruce Banman, and a disgruntled BC United, earlier BC Liberal, as soon as he crossed to Rustad, it only takes 2 members to have official party status in the BC legislature. So the Greens have official party status with 2 members, and each has got a job. You know, you become House Leader or Whip or whatever the hell. It's not that it's that hard to whip 2 members, but when one of them is yourself. But in any event, yeah, I mean, you know, we've gone several steps down the road here. We don't even know if they're going to be able to work things out with Brody. But yeah, if they split and 1 or 2 people join her, she could start a new political party in the legislature. There's still a few names available out there, although we've gone through an awful lot of them. You know, what are they going to call it? She'd call it the Residential Schools Truth Squad or something insensitive like that. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, the Donald Trump party, that was a suggestion, as you say. That could work.
MAGA right. DC, yeah, God. Okay.
Okay, well, hopefully when we talk next week, this will all have settled out one way or another.
You think things are going to clarify in BC politics next week, Harold?
Well, yes, that's true. And who knows what will be happening south of the border by next week.
Okay.
But thank you, Vaughn. We'll watch for you on the pages of the Vancouver Sun.
Good to talk to you, Harold.